talk about Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. This team is in a terrible state right now, and Daniel Jones is in a terrible state as well. This team, being a year removed from making the NFL playoffs, going to the playoffs, beating the Minnesota Vikings and winning a playoff game, ended up being 6-11 this season, and Daniel Jones looked worse this season than he did last season when he earned that contract with the New York Giants. Now, you no longer have Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is one of the best running backs in the NFL. But you look at this Giants team with and without Saquon Barkley, he was a huge chunk of their offense. They're going to miss Saquon Barkley a lot. You bring in a guy like Devin Singletary, and Devin Singletary is a solid running back. Came over from the Houston Texans, but he also had some very good years with the Buffalo Bills. And I do trust that Brian Daboll can get the most out of him. Brian Daboll was on that coaching staff when he was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. He was the offensive play caller. So I expect for Devin Singletary to be a solid running back, 898 rushing yards on the season, average 4 yards a carry. I think that he'll be a very good running back with this team. He's not going to be a Saquon Barkley type of running back, but he can be very solid with this team. But I want to talk about Daniel Jones and this team as a whole. Daniel Jones is not the right quarterback for this team long term. And you look at what Daniel Jones has not been able to do over the last couple of years. He's only thrown 20 plus passing touchdowns one season in his career, and that was his rookie season. He had 24 passing touchdowns to 12 interceptions. And you say, okay, there's something there with this kid because he only played in 13 games. Those were solid numbers at the time. And that offensive line was horrible then. But you look at the 2019 season, they did not have a true number one wide receiver. They just traded Odell Beckham to the Cleveland Browns. So Daniel Jones has never played with a quote unquote true number one wide receiver. They went out and they paid Kenny Golladay, but we saw how that ended up. As soon as Brian Daboll came over to the coaching staff, he was done. This is a guy that ran lazy routes and he had no hands towards the end of his tenure with the New York Giants. But you look at Daniel Jones in 2020, 11 passing touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He was sacked 45 times in 14 games played. In 2021, Daniel Jones, 10 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, was sacked 22 times. And he missed some time during that season dealing with a neck injury. But you come back over to 2022. 15 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He looked very good. He did get sacked 44 times, but it did not faze him. Brian Daboll put him in a quarterback-friendly system. You had him and Saquon Barkley carrying the offense. A great situation. But they were still not an elite caliber team, but they made the NFL playoffs. So you think, hey, the Giants are heading to the right direction. You finally have given this kid a true head coach in Brian Daboll and a true play caller. Because before that, you had Jason Garrett calling plays, and Joe Judge was the head coach. 2 horrible coaches for Daniel Jones. So that definitely hurt the development of Daniel Jones. 2 things can be true. The New York Giants can be a bad football team and Daniel Jones can be a bad quarterback. And I believe both of those things are true. But one very interesting thing stood out to me. When you look at Daniel Jones's numbers, all those sacks that have been accumulated since he's been drafted in the NFL, since 2019, he's been the 3rd most sacked quarterback in the NFL. He's been sacked 179 times, and he's been hit over 200 times within that time frame. And he hasn't been able to finish certain seasons because of those injuries due to the offensive line and lack of protection of the offensive line. So when you look at Daniel Jones, this team never went out there and they were never able to go out there and get a true number one wide receiver. They didn't attempt to draft a guy in the 1st round. Instead, they relied on Darius Slayton, who was a 5th round pick, who's been very good with this team. He has led this team in receiving yards in the last 4 out of 5 years. But he's never had over 800 receiving yards in a season. And he's never had over 60 catches in the season. And this is a guy early on struggled to catch the football. Now, as of late, he's been their best wide receiver. But that's the problem. When a man is averaging 750 yards a season and he's leading your team in receiving yards, that's a major problem. Darius Slayton is not a true number one wide receiver. No disrespect to him. He's a number 2 at best. And on some teams, he'll be a great number 3. But when you look at Daniel Jones, you can look at the numbers and say, okay, this kid is no good. Let's move off of Daniel Jones. If they draft a quarterback in this NFL draft class with a J.J. McCarthy, you possibly trade up to get a guy like Drake May, you're going to put him in that situation with no weapons? You have Darren Waller on this team, but Darren Waller is not the same tight end that he was a couple years ago when he had over 1,000 yards receiving for the Las Vegas Raiders. And the New York Giants traded the 2nd round pick because they believed that he could come over and he could be a very good receiving threat with this team. That was not the case this season with Daniel Jones. And 5 games played this season, he had 2 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And it wasn't all on Daniel Jones because guess what? He was beat up a lot yet again. In 5 games played this season, Daniel Jones was sacked 30 times. He was on pace to go out there and be the most sacked quarterback in the NFL with guys like Sam Howell and Bryce Young. So you can look at this situation and say, okay, Daniel Jones is a horrible quarterback. The Giants have to move on. But if you bring in a rookie quarterback and they're put in that same situation, will they look any better? And the New York Giants will have to move off of Daniel Jones because he does not fit the Brian Daboll system anymore. With his legs, he does, but he's come off a torn ACL. And you can also look at times on the sideline where Brian Daboll's had enough. He's shaking his head. He's throwing the tablet. He's getting in Daniel Jones' face. Daniel Jones just puts his head down. Similar to what happened in the Seattle Seahawks game. He got sacked 10 times in that game. He does hold on to the football for too long, which is a problem with Daniel Jones when wide receivers are open. The problem why Brian Daboll was so upset when he threw that interception at the goal line in the Seahawks game Monday night, it was a wide open wide receiver in the back of the red zone. Daniel Jones didn't see him. He goes blind to the blitz. So you have a placeholder at the quarterback position. And the rest of the offense needs to have work done immediately. Now, they did go out there and they did address the offensive line. You signed Jermaine at the right tackle spot. I think that he's going to be a solid right tackle with this team. But at the same time, a couple of years ago, a lot of people thought that Nate Soldier was going to be a solid tackle with this team when he came up from the Patriots. He was horrible. Hopefully, Jermaine can have a better future with this team than he did. But you look at Jermaine. He's faster than Evan Neal at that tackle position, and he can deal with the bull rush. Evan Neal has been a bust. The last 2 years have been abysmal to watch on film. He's too slow on the edge, and it has hurt Daniel Jones and it hurts that entire side of the offensive line. Now, the New York Giants over the last couple of years, they have not been able to figure out the offensive line pieces. Andrew Thomas has been the only one. Since 2017, this offensive line has been a major problem. You can even say from 2016, this team offensive line has been a major problem. They cannot protect the quarterback, and in run blocking, they're very inconsistent. And Saquon Barkley, a lot of times with this team, had to go out there and break 2 to 3 tackles before he got into the open field, before he got past the line of scrimmage, because the offensive line is not good enough. And they've tried to hit on picks. You tried Eric Flowers. He was terrible. You've tried Evan Neal. Right now, he is terrible. Hopefully, he's a better guard than he is a tackle, but we will see. We said the same thing about Eric Flowers. You drafted John Michael Schmitz. Hopefully, he can be a good center, but it's a question mark by him. You have Andrew Thomas, and that's it. So they need to rebuild this offensive line, and they fired and hired offensive line coaches as well. They just can't figure it out. You need to add some wide receivers, and you need to add some more offensive line help. Hopefully adding in a guy like Jermaine would definitely help out this offense. The defense is not bad for this team at all. It's just the offense. And due to the fact that they do not have weapons on the perimeter, teams just run man coverage. Look at what the San Francisco 49ers did this season. They ran that man coverage. They blitzed Daniel Jones. He had nowhere to go, and it was game over. And then you just choke off the run game. So if you go out there, stack the box, take the run game away from Daniel Jones. Don't let him go out there and kill you with his legs. Make him kill you with his arm. And it's not because Daniel Jones can't go out there and throw. He's thrown some beautiful passes in the past. Now, he is very inconsistent, but they do not have guys that can just go out there and get open. They don't have a T. Higgins. They don't have a Jamar Chase. This team does not have a true number one wide receiver. Darius Slayton can get past people. Then they'll put him in bracket coverage. Then everyone else is just clamped up. Wan'Dale Robinson could be a very good wide receiver with this team in the future. 525 receiving yards on the season. But he came off his rookie season to where he tore his ACL in that season. Jalen Hyatt did not have a receiving touchdown this season, and he's a one-trick pony so far. He can only run one route consistently, and that's the go route. And this is a guy that you spent a third-round pick on coming out of Tennessee. Hopefully he can develop. So with that first round pick, you have to go Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. The last time they drafted a wide receiver from LSU, it was Odell Beckham, and he was awesome with this team. Hopefully they can go out there and get a guy like Malik Neighbors to go out there and help out Daniel Jones. But regardless, Daniel Jones is not going to be the long-term quarterback for the next 4 to 5 years. We all know that right now. We can look at the numbers. This is a guy that cannot elevate the talent around him, and I get it. The offensive line has been abysmal. You need to put more help around Daniel Jones. But at the same time, a lot of his struggles are his own fault. Like I mentioned before, 2 things can be true. The pieces around Daniel Jones cannot be good enough, and Daniel Jones himself cannot be good enough. At the end of the day, when you have a franchise quarterback, he's supposed to go out there and he is supposed to elevate the guys around him. Daniel Jones cannot do that. The reason why he had those 15 pass touchdowns, those 5 interceptions, and those great numbers for him in the rushing category is because of Saquon Barkley and because he's an athletic quarterback. And Daniel Jones is not a bad quarterback. I believe that he will benefit from a change of scenery. The same way with the New York Giants. If you let Brian Daboll go out there and develop his own quarterback, you can be in an amazing situation. Look at what he did with Josh Allen. He helped develop Josh Allen. Daniel Jones is not the freak athlete that Josh Allen is. He's not as big as Josh Allen. But Daniel Jones is a sneaky athlete. But if you take his legs away and you have to go out there and consistently read the NFL defenses over and over again, he's inconsistent. And this is a team that cannot go out there and compete on a weekly basis with teams like the Dallas Cowboys or even the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know what happened in the back half of the season. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Philadelphia Eagles were collapsing. They could not play defense. You look at the Dallas Cowboys. Over the last couple of years, the Cowboys have owned this team because they run that man coverage. They're faster than the New York Giants, and they're a better team than the New York Giants because they have better personnel on the defensive end when it comes in terms of just going out there and bull rushing the linemen, the offensive linemen, and the wide receivers aren't good enough. They need to go out there and get a brand new offensive philosophy. So I feel bad for Daniel Jones on one end, but on the other end, they went out there and they paid Daniel Jones as well. And if the New York Giants had so much faith in Daniel Jones, they would have exercised the fifth-year option. Instead, they declined the fifth-year option. That's how they really felt about Daniel Jones. If they would have exercised that fifth-year option and he had a year like this year, they wouldn't have resigned on this team. They would have went out there and they would have drafted another quarterback. So even ownership is not that high on Daniel Jones overall. A lot of people forget that they declined that fifth-year option. That's why they had to pay him sooner than later. If they would have exercised the fifth-year option, you could have went out there and possibly paid Saquon Barkley and then kick the can down the road with Daniel Jones. But I do like some moves that they have made in free agency. I mentioned Jermaine at the right tackle spot. They did go out there and they shred up their defense. Their defense is going to be very good this season. You're going to have a brand new defensive coordinator. Wink Martindale will not be the defensive coordinator this season. And I think that he did a very solid job when he was with this team. Him and Brian Daboll had a lot of disagreements behind the scenes. But now you're going to call in a guy like Shane Bowen. I think that he could be a solid defensive coordinator with this team. Dexter Lawrence is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. I love his game. He can push the pocket. He's going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities when I speak of these edge rushers in just a second. But Dexter Lawrence can go out there. He can stop the run. He can push the pocket. He can cause some fumbles. He's very good. But they went out there and they traded for Brian Burns. They traded the second-round pick and a fifth-round pick. That's a steal for this team. He did have 8 sacks on the season. That is low for him, but he is a guy that can come off the edge, give you a lot of pressure. And he can help elevate Kayvon Thibodeau. You have a defensive line now with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns. And Brian Burns in the past has had double-digit sacks. He's had multiple forced fumbles in the season as well. So he's a very good young pass rusher that you have right now. And you look at a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, he's going to continue to develop. In just his second season, had 11.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. He's 23 years old. And one thing that I always say about Kayvon Thibodeau, even going back to Oregon, he has to keep his motor high. This is a guy that will take some plays off from time to time. You look at him this season. For the first couple of games of the season, he did nothing. He did not have a tackle. He didn't do anything. A forced fumble. Then out of nowhere, he just has these crazy games. The pressure rate was down this season. That is something that you want to take note of. His pressure rate was higher his rookie season, but he's so fast coming off the edge, he can just go out there and beat most tackles with his speed. So if he can develop to the next level with a guy like Brian Burns, that's a great thing for the New York Giants. You did lose Xavier McKinney at the safety spot. That's a major miss for the New York Giants because he was amazing with this team. He is now with the Green Bay Packers, but you have Jason on the back end. He did a very good job this season. Jason is a very good safety, in my opinion. He's very consistent in certain games, and he was going out there and he was making a lot of plays. Now, he did benefit a lot from playing alongside Xavier McKinney, but he had 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 6 pass deflections, and he had 59 solo tackles. That's very good. And you also look at the rest of the secondary. Deonte Banks is a guy that fit the Wink Martindale system, a press man corner. Did not have the best season this season. He struggled a lot. But I do think that he has the skill set to go out there and he could be a top graded corner in the NFL. And you have Trey Hawkins as well. It'll be very interesting to see what Shane Bowen can do with both of those guys. And the linebackers are going to be in good shape as well. You got Bobby Okereke in last year's free agency class from the Indianapolis Colts. And they need to get some linebackers on this team because going out there with Jalen Smith the year before when you made the NFL playoffs, that wasn't good enough. So I looked at the New York Giants right now as a team that's going to try to run the football as much as possible. And they're going to go out there and they're going to try to play defense to the best of their ability. But I don't think that it can work in this division that they're in. The Dallas Cowboys are a weak playoff team, but they are a very good regular season team. And they have had the New York Giants number for the last couple of years. For the last 6 games, they've defeated the New York Giants. And they do not have an answer for Dak Prescott. The Philadelphia Eagles will be a tough task as well. And the Washington Commanders, they're in that rebuilding stage. But for the New York Giants, you have to put more playmakers around Daniel Jones while you're still with this team. And in the next 2 years, you can move off this contract and you can finally get the quarterback that you want. So it's not just a completely horrible situation for the Giants. You do have some talent, but you're lacking those offensive pieces. And that sucks for the Giants. Because the New York Giants are in the situation right now in the NFL. You have to go out there and score points to win football games. I do not think that they can compete with some of the mid-level teams and definitely the elite level teams in the NFC to get back into the NFL playoffs. And that sucks because just a year ago, like I mentioned earlier in the video, they went to the NFL playoffs. They beat the Minnesota Vikings. But the New York Giants have to do something with this offensive line. They have to put more playmakers out there for Daniel Jones and for the next quarterback as well. They did sign Drew Lock. We'll see if he can beat out Daniel Jones at training camp. I understand what he was saying, that everything that Brian Daboll told him, like Daniel Jones is going to be the starter. But at the same time, we've seen Brian Daboll bench Kenny Golladay when he was making a lot of money. So you can expect the same thing. If Daniel Jones goes out there and he's stinking it up, they will put Drew Lock out there and they'll just roll out with him. And Drew Lock could possibly be in that Geno Smith type of situation where this kid comes in, he could possibly take over. That's a low chance, but it could happen. But the New York Giants better start scouting up quarterbacks right now, later in the NFL draft, or next season, because Daniel Jones will not be with this roster for the next 4 to 5 years. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the New York Giants, and should they move on from Daniel Jones in this year's draft class? And if they should, who should the quarterback be? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, each and every last one, you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for watching the video, guys. God bless. Peace.